The most famous sermon in all of history opens with a single word, and almost every Bible you have ever held makes that word sound far too small. We have turned that word into a caption. We posted over new keys, a new ring, a clean scan, a photo where everyone is finally smiling. Blessed. But here's the question that word cannot survive. What do you call the person whose life is quietly falling apart? Because Jesus did not say, happy. He said something far stronger and far harder to lose. This is not word games. This is the difference between a faith that collapses when life does and one that does not. I am not going to hand you this from behind a pulpit. For a long time, this exact word made me feel like a fraud because my life did not look blessed, and I assumed that meant God had passed me by. It was not a sermon that changed that. It was learning what this word actually says in the language Jesus spoke. So I am not teaching you from above. I am telling you what pulled me back. Here is where we are going together. 3 keys unlock all of it. First, the actual Greek word Jesus used, and why happy was never close enough. Second, the hillside where he said it, and the people who were truly listening. And third, what this one word can change in your life tonight when no one else is watching. So let us begin exactly where the confusion begins, with a word that everyone in that crowd, and almost everyone since, assumed they already understood. And that assumption, that we already know what blessed means, is the very first thing we have to set down, because the first key to this entire sermon is not some hidden doctrine. It is one worn-out word. Blessed. Say it out loud today, and notice where your mind goes. It reaches for a feeling, lucky, fortunate, comfortable. Somewhere along the way, blessed quietly drifted until it meant almost the same thing as happy, and that small drift is not harmless. It rewrites the entire Sermon on the Mount before Jesus even finishes his first sentence. Think about how we actually use the word now. A promotion comes through, and we say we are blessed. The keys to the house, the test that comes back clean, the baby that arrives safe, and under the photo we type that same word, blessed. And let me be clear, there is nothing wrong with thanking God for good gifts. Scripture tells us to receive provision and healing and rescue with open hands and a grateful heart. That is not the problem. The problem is what the word does to us when the good gifts stop. Because if blessed means life is visibly going well, then the word casts an ugly shadow. If the person holding the new keys is blessed, what is the person who just lost the house? If the clean scan is a blessing, what do we call the scan that was not clean? We have built a definition of blessing that only works on a person's best day, and almost no one is living their best day. That is exactly why Matthew, chapter 5, verse 3, is so hard to hear correctly. Jesus sits down on that hillside, he opens his mouth, and the very first people he calls blessed are not the ones with the keys and the good news. They are the poor in spirit. Then he keeps going. Blessed are those who mourn. Blessed are the hungry, the merciful, the persecuted, the ones pushed to the edge. If blessed simply means happy, that list makes no sense at all. You cannot congratulate a person on their good fortune and their grief in the same breath. So either Jesus misspoke, or we have been reading him wrong for most of our lives. And here is the quiet damage that misreading does. When you flatten blessed into happy, the whole sermon turns into a scoreboard. Blessing becomes proof. If your life looks full, God must be pleased. And if your life is falling apart, some part of you starts to wonder what you did wrong, whether the blessing somehow skipped your name. That lie has sat on the chest of sincere people for a very long time. People who love God and still quietly feel they never qualified for the good word. But watch what Jesus is really doing. He is not scoring anyone's circumstances. He is speaking a word over the very people the world had already counted out. And that only makes sense if the word underneath our English is not happy at all. To hear it, we have to go under the translation, back to the word Matthew actually chose. Because once you hear that word, you cannot hear this verse the same way again. The second key is the scene itself, because words mean nothing until you know who they were spoken to. And to hear this word the way it was first heard, we have to climb the hill with him. Picture the morning. The sun is already warm over the Sea of Galilee. Word about this teacher has spread through every village, and the crowds have come, but look closely at who is actually in that crowd. These are not comfortable people. Matthew tells us they came from Galilee, from the Decapolis, from as far as Syria, and they carried their sick, the ones in pain, the ones tormented, the ones who could not walk. This is a hillside crowded with need. People who had run out of options and had heard there was finally someone who might see them. This is exactly who leaned in to listen. And then Jesus does something small that changes everything. He goes up the mountain, he sits down, and his disciples come to him. Now to us, sitting down looks casual. In that world, it was the opposite. When a rabbi stood, he was reading. When a rabbi sat down, he was about to teach with full authority. So this is not a warm-up talk. This is the master taking his seat, and every word that follows carries the weight of a verdict. That is Matthew chapter 5, verses 1 and 2. He sat down, his disciples came, and he opened his mouth and began to teach them. Now here is a question people argue about, and it matters for everything that follows. Who was this really for? The disciples or the whole desperate crowd? And the beautiful answer is both. The Sermon on the Mount is not a ladder the crowd has to climb to earn their way to Jesus. It is a portrait of what life looks like once you belong to him. He is describing his people and inviting the crowd into that life at the very same time. It is both the invitation and the portrait spoken in one breath. So when he speaks that first blessing, he is not handing out prizes to winners. He is looking straight at the people the world had crossed off and calling them blessed. Read it that way, and every impossible blessing that follows suddenly makes sense. And to feel how strange that is, go back about 1,000 years before this hillside, to a man who understood it long before Jesus said it out loud, King David. On paper, David was everything the world calls blessed, a king, a palace, victory after victory. If anyone had earned the good word, it was him. And yet the songs David is most remembered for were not written from the throne. They were written from the floor, from guilt. From nights when the good days had run out completely, and his own heart was the thing crushing him. The palace could not save him. The crown could not comfort him. David knew something the crowd on that hillside was about to learn, that the word blessed does not live where we think it lives. So we have the scene. A crowd of the hurting, a teacher taking his seat with full authority, and a word about to be spoken over exactly the wrong people. Everything now depends on that word. Not the English we inherited, but the word Matthew reached for when he sat down to write this moment in Greek. One word, and it has waited long enough. And it is time we finally said it out loud. So here it is, the word Jesus actually used. In Greek, it is makarios. Say it slowly. Makarios. That is the word hiding under every blessed in the Sermon on the Mount. And the moment you understand what it carried, the verse stops sounding like a greeting card and starts sounding like a lifeline. Here's the first thing to know. Makarios was not a word about your mood. In the ancient world, this word described a kind of contentment that did not depend on anything outside of you. The old poets even used it for the gods, and for those they imagined on the blessed islands, a place beyond the reach of storms and hunger and loss. To be Makarios was to be so deeply secure, so completely provided for, that the chaos of the world simply could not touch you. It was not a good day. It was a settled state. Happiness rises and falls with your circumstances. Makarios does not move, because it was never standing on your circumstances in the first place. Now, let me be honest with you, because some of you know the dictionaries. Yes, Makarios can be translated fortunate. Yes, in some settings it carries the flavor of congratulations. I am not hiding that from you. But hear the difference. When Jesus says it, he is not congratulating people on a stroke of good luck. He is announcing a status that God gives, not one that life hands out. It is closer to this: deeply favored, held, approved by the only voice that matters. That is a blessing no bad day can repossess. And this word did not begin with Jesus. He was reaching back into something the Hebrew scriptures had been saying for centuries. Open the very first line of the very first psalm. Blessed is the one who does not walk in the counsel of the wicked. That word blessed, in Hebrew, is ashar, and it paints a picture of a person made steady, like a tree planted by streams of water, that does not wither when the heat comes. So when the crowd on that hillside hears Jesus open with blessed, their minds do not go to a smiling face, they go to a tree that holds its ground in the drought. That is the weight this one word was always carrying, and no one proved that quite like David. Remember, David is the one who could have defined blessed by his palace. Instead, listen to how he actually uses the word. In Psalm 32, verse 1, he writes, "Blessed is the one whose transgression is forgiven, whose sin is covered." Stop and feel where that comes from. This is not a man on his best day. This is a man who had done something terrible, who had hidden it until, in his own words, his bones wasted away and his strength dried up like a summer drought. David had all the happiness, money, and power could buy, and he was miserable. And the word blessed did not return to him when his circumstances improved. It returned the moment he stopped hiding and was forgiven. That is, Makarios. Not the absence of trouble, but the presence of God in the middle of it. Do you see what this does to the verse? Jesus is not promising the crowd a better mood. He is offering them a security that guilt cannot erase, that loss cannot steal, that death itself cannot cancel. He is saying there is a way to be untouchable on the inside, no matter what is happening on the outside, which raises the hardest question of the entire sermon. If this blessing is that unshakable, then who does Jesus say gets it first? Because the answer is the last person you or I would ever choose, and it is where this whole teaching turns completely upside down. So here is the answer, and it is the most upside-down sentence Jesus ever spoke. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Read that again slowly. The very first people he calls deeply favored, held, secure in God, are the poor in spirit. Not the strong in spirit, not the confident, the accomplished, the spiritually impressive, the poor. And we need to be careful here, because that phrase has been badly misunderstood, and the misunderstanding has wounded a lot of sincere people. So let me tell you what poor in spirit does not mean. It does not mean hating yourself. Jesus is not blessing the hatred you aim at yourself, or the voice in your head that says you are worthless. That voice is not from him. It does not mean depression, as if sadness were somehow holier than joy. And it does not mean being poor with your wallet, as if God prefers an empty bank account. Poverty is not the point. Something deeper is. The Greek here is even stronger than our English lets on. The word for poor is not the word for someone who is simply short on money. It is the word for a beggar, someone crouched down, completely destitute, with nothing in their hands, entirely dependent on the mercy of another. Now, put spirit next to that. To be poor in spirit is to stand before God with empty hands. It is the moment you stop pretending you have it together, the moment you drop the performance, the track record, the highlight reel, and admit, I have nothing here that earns your love. I am a beggar before you. And Jesus says, that person, that is who the kingdom belongs to. Not later, not once they clean up, now. Do you feel how offensive that would have been? The crowd lived under a system that ranked people by their goodness. The religious leaders were at the top, the visibly righteous, the ones who kept every rule. And Jesus looks past all of them and hands the kingdom to the person with empty hands. He tells a story that makes it unmistakable. Two men go up to the temple to pray. One is a Pharisee, respected, disciplined, morally spotless. He stands and thanks God that he is not like other people. And then there is a tax collector, a man everyone despised, standing far off, so ashamed he will not even lift his eyes. He just beats his chest and says, God, be merciful to me, a sinner. And Jesus delivers the verdict that turned the ancient world on its head. It was that man, the beggar, who went home right with God. Not the one with the full hands, the one with the empty ones. And now you understand David. Remember him crushed under his own guilt, his bones wasting away. When David finally broke, listen to what he discovered. The sacrifices God wants are a broken spirit. A broken and contrite heart God will not despise. David could not buy his way back with his crown or his accomplishments. He came the only way anyone comes, empty-handed, poor in spirit, and that was the exact moment the word blessed came home to him. So here is the quiet, beautiful reversal at the center of everything. The world tells you to fill your hands, to prove your worth, to earn your place. And Jesus says the kingdom cannot be earned, only received, which means the one qualification is to admit you cannot qualify. The door is so low that only those willing to bend down can walk through it. Maybe that is you tonight. Maybe you are tired of holding it all together, tired of pretending your hands are full when you know they are empty. Hear this. That is not the disqualification you have feared your whole life. According to Jesus, that is the doorway. But if the door opens to the empty-handed, then the kingdom behind that door cannot look anything like the kingdoms we know. And when you finally see what it looks like, everything the world taught you about winning falls apart. So what does this kingdom actually look like? Because Jesus keeps using that phrase, the kingdom of heaven, and if we do not know what he means, the whole sermon stays blurry. So let us be clear about it. The kingdom of heaven is not mainly a place you go when you die. That is how most of us have heard it, a reward waiting somewhere in the clouds. But that is not what Jesus is describing. The kingdom of heaven is the reign of God. It is what the world looks like wherever God is truly king, wherever his will is actually done. And the stunning claim of Jesus is that this kingdom is not only far away and future, in Jesus, it has already arrived. It is breaking into the present, right now, quietly, like light coming under a locked door. And here is the part we keep missing. This kingdom is not a prize you win. Listen to how Jesus says it in Luke, chapter 12, verse 32. Do not be afraid, little flock, for it is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom, to give it. It is a gift. It delights the Father to hand it to the empty-handed. You do not climb up to the kingdom. The king bends down and brings it to you. That changes everything. Now watch what happens to the rest of the list once you see that. Because the Beatitudes are not 8 separate achievements to check off. They are one portrait, one face. The single face of a person who has stopped performing and started depending on God. And every line of that face is a direct reversal of what the world rewards. The world says, protect yourself. Never mourn where anyone can see. Jesus says, blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. The world says, take what you can, be assertive, win. Jesus says, blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. The world says, chase pleasure until you are full. Jesus says, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. The world says, look out for yourself first. Jesus says, blessed are the merciful, the pure in heart, the peacemakers, and even those who are persecuted for doing what is right. Every single one is upside down. Every single one belongs to the person with empty hands. Do you begin to see it now? This is not a list of unrelated virtues. It is a slow-motion picture of one blessed life, the life of someone who is poor in spirit and therefore rich in God. That is the whole point Jesus is making. And this is exactly where it collides with the world you and I actually live in. Think about the value system we swim in every day. It rewards the confident, the loud, the visibly winning. The scroll lifts up the people with the full hands, the highlight reel, the flawless life. It has no category at all for the meek or the mourning or the merciful. And so we spend our lives trying to look blessed by a standard Jesus never used, while the real blessing, the unshakable one, is being handed quietly to the people who finally stopped pretending. So the kingdom is not upside down at all. We are. We have been reading the whole thing from the wrong way up. Jesus is not raising a bar out of reach for anyone. He is quietly opening a door that pride walks right past and honesty walks straight through, which leaves one last question, and it is the only one that really matters tonight. Not what this word meant 2,000 years ago on a hillside, but what it does to you right now when the video ends and the room goes quiet. Now, Let it get personal, because a word this heavy is not meant to stay on a hillside 2,000 years ago. It is meant to find you, tonight, exactly where you are, in this room, in this moment. And here is the question that trips almost everyone up. If blessed belongs to the poor in spirit, how do I actually become that? And the answer is the most freeing part of all. You do not become poor in spirit by trying harder. You do not manufacture it, or perform it, or add it to your list of things to fix about yourself. That would just be filling your hands all over again. Being poor in spirit is not one more thing to achieve. It is what happens the moment you finally stop pretending you have it together and let yourself be carried. That is why Jesus, a few chapters later, says it so plainly. Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Notice he does not say, clean yourself up and then come. He says, come, now, tired, empty, exactly as you are. The only people who never find this blessing are the ones who insist their hands are full. So picture where this actually lands. It is the person sitting in a parked car after an argument, hands shaking, who has finally run out of ways to hold it together. It is the one lying awake at 2 a.m, staring at a ceiling, doing the math on a life that did not turn out the way they planned. It is the one who just got a phone call with news that changes everything. The world would never call any of them blessed. But this is exactly where Makarios lives. Not on the mountaintop of a perfect life, but in the valley, when a person stops performing and whispers, God, I have nothing, and hears him answer, then you are exactly where I can finally hold you. And this is where David comes home. Remember the king who had everything the world calls blessed and lost his peace anyway. He did not find the word again on his throne. He found it on the floor, broken, honest, empty-handed. And from there, he wrote the line that outlived his whole kingdom. Blessed is the one whose sin is forgiven. David was not blessed because his life was happy. For a long time, it was anything but. He was blessed because he was held and forgiven and known all the way to the bottom and loved there anyway. And here is the part that keeps this from being cheap. Jesus never blessed a poverty he refused to enter himself. He did not shout this down from a comfortable distance. He walked straight into the lowest place a human being can go. He was mocked, abandoned, stripped of everything, and nailed to a cross with completely empty hands. The one person who truly deserved every blessing took the full weight of the curse, so that the beggars, the mourners, the broken could be handed the kingdom for free. That is why this word can hold you. It was bought at the bottom by the only one who ever went lower than you will. So hear it now, wherever you are sitting. You do not have to look blessed to be blessed. You do not have to have it together. You just have to come with empty hands. That is the whole invitation. And when the good days run out, and one day, for all of us they will, happiness will pack its bags and leave with the circumstances that fed it. But this one word will not. There is a blessing that does not move when everything else does. And that is the one Jesus is holding out to you tonight. Let me bring it home. When we started, I told you we had turned blessed into a caption, a word we paste over our best days. But now you know the truth. The real blessing was never about your best day at all. The world will call you blessed when your life finally looks full. Jesus calls you blessed the moment you stop pretending it is. And tonight, maybe for the first time, you can stop. That is why David found the word again, not on his throne, but on the floor, at the lowest point of his life. The palace never gave it to him. Being known at his worst, and forgiven anyway, did. And that same word is on the table for you tonight. Not a better life first, and blessing later. Blessing now, right in the honest place where you actually are. Before you go, can I ask one small thing? If this landed somewhere real in you tonight, go down to the comments and type one word, blessed, so I know it found you too. If it opened this verse for you, tap the like button. It genuinely helps this reach someone who needs the same word tonight. And subscribe, so we can keep walking through these words together, one at a time. If you want to see where this kingdom leads next, watch the video on the word tetelestai, the word Jesus spoke from the cross, right after this. And now, receive this. May the God who calls the empty-handed blessed meet you exactly where you are. May you stop performing long enough to be carried. And when your good days run out, may you know, all the way down to the bottom, that you are held, you are forgiven, and you are loved. You are more blessed than you ever knew. May the peace of the Lord Jesus, the one who went to the bottom for you, be with you now and always. Whatever you are carrying as this ends, may you finally set it down. Go in his peace.